Hi, this is Heidi Bedritis with Bedritis Books. I'm a bookkeeper and certified advanced pro advisor with QuickBooks Online, and I encounter a lot of different scenarios to troubleshoot and resolve when working in clients' books. Today we'll be focusing on how to ensure that our financial reports are accurate before we submit them to our CPA or tax professional at the end of the year. Specifically in this video, we'll be focusing on the reconciliation aspect of that. So before we go in and reconcile, we do need to take a quick look at our banking screen, focus on the bank account we'll be reconciling, and take a look to make sure that there's nothing sitting in the For Review tab before we try to reconcile. Now, if it's in the For Review tab, that means it fed from the bank account and that we have not categorized it yet. And until we have categorized it, and it has moved into the categorized section, it is not going to show up in our reconciliation screen, and it's not going to show up on our financial reports. So we do need to ensure that everything has been categorized before we reconcile. In this case, it has, so we can come over to accounting and reconcile. We can choose our bank account from this selection and put in an ending balance and an ending date. Now, the ending balance and the ending date are coming from the bank statement. We need to log into our bank account, pull up the bank statement for this checking account, and review the ending balance and ending date from that statement to reconcile to. So we'll start reconciling. And looking at this reconciliation screen, there are some things to highlight. So first off, what I see is that we are reaching a $0 difference here, which is a very important part of reconciling. It means that the balances match up to the bank account and that we won't be putting any reconciliation discrepancies on our profit and loss statement. However, there's another very important part that I'm not seeing, and that is we need to ensure that everything checked off from the bank statement accounts for everything in this queue. Because if it's in this queue, we've already identified that's already on our profit and loss statement or on our balance sheet. It's on our financial reports. So if it's in this queue and we reconcile to zero, this is just going to feed forward every time we reconcile, but it's going to be lingering on our financial reports. And if we're reconciling to the bank statement, then these numbers are going to be inaccurate as far as duplicates to what's on the bank statement, or maybe it's hitting the wrong bank account in QuickBooks Online, but it doesn't match the bank statement, which we've already identified is the priority here. So if this is not matching up properly, not everything's accounted for yet, let's go ahead and select everything so that we can unselect everything. So we can go by the bank statement and check off everything line by line that's on the bank statement that we're hypothetically reviewing right now. So let's say we've checked off everything and okay, all these items are on the bank statement, but we still don't know what the story is on these two items. They're on our profit and loss statement or on our balance sheet, but they're not on our bank statement. What do we do about that? So just as a highlight, these green squares mean that the item fed through the banking center. So this is the banking center. We were in that a moment ago. These green squares indicate that that's where these transactions came from, whereas maybe some of the other transactions came through in a different way. And that is where sometimes things can be duplicate, and that's what we want to resolve. So let's take a dive into one of these scenarios. We see $105 was deposited from Amy's Bird Sanctuary via a received payment on November 20th. We see another $105, again from Amy's Bird Sanctuary, deposited into sales, just a straight deposit, 5 days later on November 25th. Now, a summary or a highlight of what a received payment is versus a deposit. A received payment is one of the tools that feeds into the customer center over here, or one of the tools over here that feeds into the customer center. So an invoice or a received payment, a sales receipt are all items that will feed into our customer center, which is found by going to sales and customers right here. And if we were to look at it, Amy's Bird Sanctuary, once again, we see that invoice and that received payment that closes the invoice. So let's click back over, take another look into our reconciliation, and take a deeper look into why we have these two transactions. So we've already identified this one's a good workflow for adding things to the customer center, but this deposit that we're looking at was just manually coded. It was manually coded from the banking screen, but it was manually coded. Now, I see this a lot with clients' books. What's happening is the workflow is being broken. So essentially the invoice was created, then they received the money and they created a receive payment to close that invoice, and I'll show you what that looks like right here. They entered a receive payment and they checked off that invoice to say all of the $105 was paid on that invoice. So that's two sections of the workflow for this. But essentially the third piece is broken, and which creates the duplicate. So instead of when that actual money came through the bank, the money that they made a receive payment for, when it came through the bank, they just entered it as a deposit. And that duplicated it instead of matching it to the receive payment and closing that workflow. So how do we resolve that? There is a method for that. There's actually a few different ways we could do this, but I'll show you one. And that's going over to the banking screen. But before we do that, let's take a quick look again. It's Amy's Bird Sanctuary for $105 on November 25th. So we're going to look for that. Banking, we're in checking. We're going to click on categorize because if it's in the reconciliation screen, it's going to be in the, and especially with a bank feed, green square assigned to it, it's going to be in this categorize section. We'll sort by description. And we see this $105 right here. So we see that it was deposited straight to sales, and we're going to go ahead and undo that. It's going to put it back in our for review section, which also takes it out of our reconciliation screen. But we still need to address it because otherwise it's floating forward over here instead. How did it originally get coded to put it in the categorized section under just a deposit? It was categorized like this. It was clicked on categorize, the vendor was input, and the category was assigned, and then it was added. Not a bad method if the client is not using this center to record their sales and to track sales by client more thoroughly. And if they're doing that, adding it this way, we've already identified is duplicate. So we need instead to find a match. We want to say that this $105 that was received is the match to the receive payment we already entered. And that's what this is finding for us right here. It's finding that receive payment from Amy's Bird Sanctuary that we already entered on November 20th. And if it wasn't showing up right here, we could click find other matches and it would show us all the available options, and we could check it off in here instead, and we could hit save. Now that puts it back in categorized, and instead of adding it as a deposit, it matched it to the payment appropriately. And now if we go back into reconcile, what we're seeing is we only see one entry of the $105 deposit, which matches up to our bank statement. And also the bank feed icon is now tied to the receive payment. And that's because we matched it appropriately to the receive payment in the banking center. So this one's accounted for, cleaned up, and just as a highlight, so I had opened the profit and loss detail a moment ago. So when I opened it, it had the $105 deposit to, I'll collapse that, to the income line. It had $105 coded to it from the invoice. And again, it had the $105 coded to it via the deposit, which once again inflated the sales or inflated that income line. But if I refresh it now that we've made that correction, we see that $105 made from the invoice, but not the duplicate deposit. So we have fixed the income line on our profit and loss statement for this month. And coming back to our reconciliation screen, we are getting there. We have one item left to clean up, and then we will be able to submit our reconciliation. So this is a different scenario to review. So this scenario is transfers. So if you think about transfers between your business bank accounts, maybe you have a savings, a checking, and a credit card. So your checking is probably where you're receiving money into, and periodically you may pay a monthly balance on your credit card. These transfers that happen, if they're within your bank accounts and if these bank accounts are included in your QuickBooks Online, then these are all happening within QuickBooks, and you really don't want to double count those transactions. So that's what we're seeing here is this transaction double counted. It was a transfer from savings, or I'm sorry, let's see, it was a payment out, we're in checking. So it was a transfer from checking to savings. And the memo that came through on that one is transfer from 0000, which is the checking account. And this one is not showing up with a bank feed for the checking account. We're in the checking account right now, and it's not showing that it came through the bank feed. So if we were to click on it, this one's a little tricky because what we're trying to actually get to with these transfers between bank accounts that are all managed in QuickBooks Online is we actually want 2 online banking matches for them because we need to match it when the money was paid out from checking, and we need to match it when the money was brought into savings or the credit card. Or if we look at this, this is actually showing one banking match, but it's not showing the banking match on this side. And that's because this is actually coming from the savings account side. And then on this checking account side, when that same transaction was sent out, it was coded, let's take a look. It was coded as an expense from checking to uncategorized asset. And if we take a look at the balance sheet, we're seeing an uncategorized asset of $100 listed on there. So we know that this is erroneous because we're taking a look at this. We've already looked at our bank statement. There were not these 2 payments of $100 made. There's only one. We've identified that these are both likely the transfers. We look at the memo line. We look at the dates. We look at the amounts. There's a series of things that we can see. So we know that these need to be matched to each other. Now, first off, I can definitely see that this uncategorized asset one is incorrect. So we could change it. It says transfer to 1234, which is the savings account. So we could type that in and correct it this way and say, okay, it was actually transferred to savings, not uncategorized asset. But we still have it duplicated in our account here. So that did fix the balance sheet. But we still have it in here twice. And it's going to actually, now that we've recoded it to savings, it's actually going to be hitting savings twice. And these balances in your bank accounts are just going to be off. So let's go ahead and actually delete the one that's in this banking feed, just so that we're consistent in what we're doing. We don't know if this one could have already been reconciled to the other account. So we don't want to delete that one. Let's go ahead and delete the one we're working in now, which will throw it back into our banking center. Let's take a look here. Now we knew it was fed through our banking center initially because it had the green square, which is why it put it back in this banking center. It's the same thing that we did when we went into categorize and we undid something. It was just another way to do it. So now that we're back in here and it's back in here, we can find the match, which is exactly what we want to do. Just to highlight again, originally what had been done was this was categorized to uncategorized asset and added manually. But we know, especially after looking at that reconciliation report, that we need to click Find Match and match it to this transfer that came through from the other side. So then we will click Match. We can go back to Accounting and Reconcile, click Resume Reconciling, and look, our screen is still that $0 difference. Everything is checked off. And if we look at this now and we click Edit, we see these 2 online banking matches, which is the happy place of transfers between bank accounts. So we can close that out now. We've reconciled to the ending balance on our bank statement. We've checked off all the items that are showing on our bank statement. The difference is 0. Our reports are, the numbers are in our reports, or at least are accurate for the end of the month with no duplicate transactions. And we can click Finish Now. And we can click Done. I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, I do offer one-on-one coaching to get you set up, or monthly bookkeeping to free up your time and capacity for other aspects of your business. Feel free to direct message me and we can get a free discovery call scheduled.